Okay, well, thanks everyone for coming along to this Lunch and Learn session. I think probably most of you know me, but I'll not assume that you do. And I'm David Foster. I'm the Director of Career Development and Skills at University College Dublin. And I'm really pleased to be able to introduce this session this afternoon by Christian Brennan and Georgina Higgins from the Technological University for Dublin. I'm particularly interested because it's a subject very close to my own heart. I grew up as a teenager in the 70s, realizing I wasn't quite the same as a lot of people around me, and eventually realizing I was a gay man and starting a gay life at a time whenever it was illegal to be practicing in that sort of a way. So I have a very distinct memory of different types of discrimination, both explicit and implicit, both in the workplace and socially. And I think it's an area that we've all grown much more accustomed to dealing with and to challenging our own unconscious biases as we deal with the sort of more diverse communities we have in universities and the workplace these days. So I'm delighted, Christian, to be able to introduce the session and to yourself and Georgina for agreeing to deal with this really important topic and to give us some idea of what your experiences have been and maybe how we can improve and learn from you in terms of our own practices too. So I'm not going to keep you back at all. You've got an important agenda to cover with us and we're looking forward to it. So thanks, Christian. I'll hand over to you now.
Great. Well, listen, thanks so much, David, for that introduction, and thank you everybody for logging in today, particularly when it's such a lovely sunny day outside. And I'm sure you were with Angela down on Tramore Strand, walking along, soaking up the rays. But listen, thanks so much for logging in today. And I hope that you get something out of our session today. I'm going to try and make it a little bit interactive as much as I possibly can. I have to be honest, I wish I was in front of you all, that we were somewhere together, because I think it really helps with our learning. And it's a great way, I think, to share from each other and learn from each other, because I know all of you have different stories, different expertise, different experiences that I think we can really learn a lot from each other. But we'll try and do that as much as we can online as well. I suppose from the very start, it's really encouraging to see so many of you here today, particularly for this topic. It's one that's very close to my heart. I'm by no means an expert, and I really state that very, very clearly. I'm not an expert, but I have a huge passion in the area. I have to say, I suppose I have a lot of my family members that are very active in the LGBT community, and I suppose that's where my interest originally stemmed from. I have a family member who transitioned in her 60s, which I have to say was an extremely, extremely tough time for her. She got a lot of negativity towards her transition. She really struggled with it, but was exceptionally brave to keep going with her transition. And she's really inspired me to, I suppose, do what I can in my role in career guidance or career coaching, just to highlight how we can best support our LGBT students as best we can. So that's where this has come from here. I have developed resources. I have developed a coaching guide, which I'm going to tell you about during the presentation, that is going to be shared with all of you. I want to make it as widely accessible to everybody as possible. It's not something that I want TU Dublin just to keep for their students. I think it should be as widely available to all students as absolutely possible. So what I'm going to do is going to get cracking. I'm going to share my screen with you. Georgina, you might tell me if I make an absolute hames of this. Me and technology is brutal. So I'm just going to share this with you. And just going to check with you, Georgina. Can you hear this okay?
Yeah, and see it perfectly. Thank you.
Lovely. And just to say, particularly big thanks to Georgina, who agreed to help me with the chat. Georgina is not only one of my very best friends, my job sharer, who I'm so lucky to work with, and she's also my blankie. Everywhere I go, I bring Georgina with me because she looks after me. So here we go. So this just is a little bit of our chance here to talk to today about how we can best support our LGBTI+ students, And I'm just going to make some particular reference to our transgender students who may be coming to us. So just when I look at this different word, or I don't know what you call it, a whole mixture of terms here, when I look at this here myself, it's something even for myself is I can get very confused about all the different terms, I suppose, that are there with respects to gender. And I have a niece who's very active, or she's graduated from UCD, but she was very active in the LGBTI society during her time in UCD, and she was brilliant because she'd always sit down with me and I'd be very patient with me and say, listen, tell me a little bit more about this, tell me a little bit more about that. And I think it's the first steps that we can do is just to help ourselves become, I suppose, more informed about different gender stereotypes and how we can broaden our knowledge in this area. And even the fact that you've logged on today is fantastic. And I know a lot of universities, I know certainly with TU Dublin, they're really pushing the equality agenda. I'm sure Georgina would agree with me. There's loads of training that we hadn't had before that we're able to access now just to help us. We have a new directorate in equality and that's been a really good progression. So the more chance that we can have to, I suppose, broaden our knowledge. And it's an interesting thing. I was watching Netflix the other day, and my mother is living with me at the moment, and I said to her, what would you like to watch? And she said, you choose, you choose. So I, particularly because of my family member who had transitioned herself, there was a really good documentary, and I'd recommend any of you just to take a note of this here. It's called Disclosure, and it's on Netflix. And it was an interesting one because they talked about different people who are transgender, and they had said, you know, so many of us, she says, you know, I remember there was one person, she said, you know, I don't know another transgender person. So what I'm going on is what's portrayed in the media. And it's a whole sort of investigation into how being transgender is portrayed in the media and how that has influenced people's knowledge, etc. So what I suppose I would encourage you to do is I would encourage you to look at that series, or it's actually just a documentary. It's called Disclosure on Netflix. But it's just a little bit about our own knowledge of transgender issues or LGBT issues, and just to encourage ourselves to get to know, to get to grips with it. So what I'm going to start off with today is just a quiz. So what I'm going to ask you to do is I'm going to ask you to use the chat to put in your answer, and the lovely Georgina is going to tell us what you think of these following questions. So the first one is, about how many trans people are there in the world? A, 500,000, B, 10.5 million, or C, 15.5 million. So pop that into the chat, what you think. Any answers coming back, Georgina?
So there's A, there's B, there's C. It's a real mix.
A real mix. Well, interestingly, the answer is there's actually C. 15.5 million trans people are there in the world. And they're roughly estimating that in the EU, there's 1.5 million. And in Ireland, you're looking at about 46,000. Which is actually quite a lot of people when you think of it. So going on to our next question. In which country were most trans people killed in the last 7 years? So what's coming back, Georgina?
So again, another mix of C, A, B.
Okay. Well, interestingly, it was B, Brazil, and there was 689 people killed in the last 7 years due to a transphobic situation, which is absolutely shocking when you can think of it. And it's a thing that they hit on from that documentary that I mentioned on Netflix, is the abuse and hatred, unfortunately, that can present itself with trans people is absolutely horrific. Now, thankfully in Ireland would have one of the best, or I would say, when you think of where we've come from in Ireland, currently in the last generation, I would say, as a more liberal society, it's something in Ireland that we've seen, but we will go through the different research that has been done in Ireland towards people's experience of having been transgender and how that has affected them. Okay, what percentage of trans people in the US say they have been badly treated at work? What do we got?
A lot of people going for A, 90%.
Yeah, a lot of people are right. Absolutely, 90%. Isn't that shocking? 90%. And our final one, no one is allowed to legally change gender in at least how many countries in the world?
A lot of people going for C on that one, Christiane.
Okay, and the answer there is B. 60 countries. Isn't that pretty shocking, isn't it? 60 countries you are not allowed to legally change your gender. So that's the backdrop from the world, or from globally. What we'll do now is we'll look a little bit at the Irish situation. So we look at the Irish situation. So if we look at the Tenney report, so the Tenney report is a report that was introduced by the Transgender Equality Network of Ireland. Now they're a super organisation. They've given training to us in TU Dublin. They've done it a number of times, and I'd certainly say if you see Tenney training being offered through your institution, absolutely go for it. It is absolutely superb. They do a huge amount of work with respects to transgender equality, and they did a report called Speaking from the Margins, and they found that in Ireland, of the people that they interviewed, 78% had experienced suicidal ideation, which was higher pre-transition. 83% experienced periods of stress, 82% depression, and 73% anxiety, which, as we can see, has a huge impact on people's mental health. Now, interestingly enough, when they looked at this investigation and this report that they put together in their research, the mental health issues reported were related to negative social attitudes and misunderstandings, rather than, let's say, identifying as a transgender individual. So it was more about society's reaction or the social attitudes that impacted on mental health. Okay. So what I think can be useful to do is, because if we think of our students, they come into us in first year, and particularly if they have had a negative experience at second level, it can be useful just to see where they have come from and the experience they've had before they come into third level education. And it's something even that I find, let's say, just speaking from my own family situation, they found that the reaction that they got in school was much worse than what they got in third level, because they've said that they found when they came to third level, they found their tribe. There was the LGBT society that they could join. There was people who they could have a much wider choice of how to find friends, as opposed to the narrow of second level school. So it can be interesting just to see what the backdrop is for people who have come from school and what they've experienced. So the majority said that they were still called by their birth name and giving an inappropriate pronoun. Many still had to wear the uniform that misaligned with their gender identity. Most experienced barriers accessing bathroom facilities they felt safe in. Most had difficulties with staff with inappropriate questions and transphobic comments. Some left school due to negative experience or had to change school. Many were subjected to bullying. Challenges due to limited understanding of non-binary identities. So as we can see, a huge amount for somebody, let's say, who's aged 15, 14, 15, 16, whatever age they are, to have to deal with all those barriers and those attitudes. And there's a really nice video on YouTube, which I'm going to get you to have a look at now. What I'm just going to say to you is the sound on this is very, very poor, but it is subtitled. I hope I did put on. Georgina, just check with me, because I might have to reshare my document if I forgot to press the button for sound. So you can tell me if there's sound on this. But this is Ronan's story.
My name's Ronan. I'm 18.
Thanks, Christiane.
Can you hear it?
Yeah, would you like, can you turn it up a little bit?
See, the sound on this is very poor.
Okay.
So just to read the subtitles.
Because I was thinking, in a relationship, I wouldn't be the girl in the relationship. Like, I just knew. I went through a lot of different labels, and my friends were a great support in that, because I had only come out to them as questioning, and they were always super open to try out pronouns, try out new names, whatever I wanted. They were really great. Then I eventually came out as trans guy, and I just immediately felt so much more comfortable, so much more like myself. I was in an all-girls school, which yeah, it wasn't great as a trans guy, obviously, being in an all-girls school. I asked my vice principal in my school to just announce it to the whole year, because I was still quite shy at the time. I don't think I could have stood up in front of 100 people and said I'm trans. Now I probably could, but obviously I just come out, so I wasn't allowed to do that. But so yeah, it was just my close friend group, and then everybody. I didn't want to be having to come into school and have to tell a new teacher every day, and then some teachers know and some teachers not know. So I just got it all done in the one go. The one thing that they were good with was the name. I don't know why, but it just happened to be that they were really good with switching names, all the teachers. But one problem was the pronouns. They just couldn't seem to get them. I don't know what it was. And they would say things like good girl and ladies, that kind of thing never stopped, really. Even after I talked to some teachers and say, listen, this is making me really uncomfortable. Could you please even just try to be more aware of the language that you're using, and that there is gender neutral alternatives. I gave them some suggestions of gender neutral alternatives to use, but it never really did stop. On one hand, like, they were respecting my name, but then not the pronouns. So it felt like they just thought I was just a girl who had changed her name, or just that they didn't see me as male, that they just thought like I was some girl who they had to call a boy. And it was really hard going into school every day knowing that I'd be called a girl, and all day, every day, by every single teacher nearly. And it was really hard on me personally as well, because school really suits me as a person. I'm very academic, so it did put me off a little bit, and that was really sad. I liked school, so. My school had a uniform with a jumper and a skirt. Obviously, not very comfortable for me. So when I did come out at that meeting, the principal said you can wear the tracksuit bottoms with the school jumper. So it didn't look great for the whole of my transition year. I wore the jumper and the tracksuit bottoms. At the start of fifth year, my school was having a whole school inspection. I went to my principal and I said, what do you want me to do? Because there's going to be inspectors here. And she said, actually, you can go back to the shop where our uniforms are sold, and they already have a pair of trousers that are in the same colour as our uniform. And I was disappointed, because I just thought, well, the option was there, so why didn't you give it to me before? What I was told was that if you have trousers, then everybody else is going to want them as well. And I was kind of like, well, why can't they all have them? Like,
and now is the trousers still for everyone?
No, they still haven't. Obviously, friends and family who aren't trans can't ever really properly understand what it's like. but it's really important for the trans person to have somebody who they can talk to about how they're feeling, even if they can't understand. Like, that was one of the best things about my friend group, is that they were always there to listen. You don't always have to understand how I'm feeling or understand exactly what I'm going through, because all I need to know is that you're there to support me and that you'll listen to me. If you don't have a supportive group of friends in school, there's always support groups to belong to, and Tony has support groups, and that there's always the internet. You can find so many people on the internet that will support you and love you, and there's so many great communities. Everyone should have access to a uniform that best represents their gender. Nobody should be made feel uncomfortable or singled out in their uniform. I'd also love for there to be TENI training every year, for TENI to give workshops to teachers to teach them about their trans students that they probably do have and don't realise, and for TENI to help teachers create a more welcoming environment for students who are trans or who may be questioning their identity and are scared to come out in school. I think that's really important, that teachers know about LGBT issues and that LGBT issues are spoken about in the classroom, because in my school they weren't. One thing that I would have loved was for me to pick a teacher or for the principal to check in on me and see how I was doing, because after I came out, that was kind of it. Like, they sorted out the name, they sorted out telling all the teachers and my year, and then that was it. But sometimes I did have issues, and sometimes I did want to speak to a member of staff, so I think it's really important to check in, especially if there aren't that many trans people in school. It can feel really isolating and like you're on your own, because you pretty much are. Just to check in with students, see how they're doing. If there's any major issues, that would have been really helpful for me.
Very moving watching that, isn't it? What's your thoughts as you watch that? Just pop it into the chat there for a minute. Any feedback there, Georgina?
Informative. Took courage and resilience to make that move. Very thought-provoking.
Yeah, it really gives you an insight, doesn't it? The challenges, you know. And in that situation, Ronan was lucky to have a very good, you know, group of friends, which is fantastic to have, you know, a good core group of friends around, but very, very challenging, you know. So if we think about how we can best approach our work with LGBTI plus students, what I'd like you to do is just to think, how do you think we can best approach our work with students coming into our career centres? What do we need to do, as be it for employer liaison officers, or we're information specialists, or we're career coaches, or we're heads of service? How do you think we need to best approach our work? Just a couple of ideas into the chat. And then come back there, Georgina.
I think people are still thinking, Christiane.
That's all right.
It came up a bit, you know, around sensitivity, more awareness initiatives, dealing with compassion and empathy, being non-judgmental, be conscious of the image we project, being conscious of pronouns, using gender neutral language.
Lovely, lovely, lovely. They're all spot on, absolutely. You know, and when there's been, you know, research done and feedback that's been sort of collated and put together, you know, a big thing has been that, you know, is to listen. And I think, like from Ronan's story there, the importance of being listened to by his friends was absolutely key. And I suppose in our work, you know, we really are trained in the ability to listen and the importance and the power of really effective listening, you know. The other thing is that everybody's journey is different. So like us all, we all have different journeys. All as individuals, our journey is going to be very different. And that we try and avoid assumptions and stereotypes and preconceptions of the people that are coming into us. Like any student coming in the door, each has their own journey, their own story, that we don't stereotype people. To be respectful, I think people said that as well. And that, you know, it's very important to say that, you know, obviously you can't always tell if somebody is transgender by looking at them, you know, and many people will not disclose, and that's completely their decision, their right to disclose or not to disclose coming in. This one here, and I really like this one, which is continue to educate yourself, because when I first, I suppose, sparked my interest, and again, it was from a family connection that really sparked it for me. What I find myself is I'm much more in tune. If I see something that is in this area, I'll read it, I'll watch it, I'll engage with it, or listen to a podcast, you know. And it's an area that, as I said myself, I'm by no means an expert, but I'm very passionate about it, and I have a real interest in it. And I think it's a really great way is to continue to educate yourself. And as I said, you know, there's loads of opportunities to you know, join webinars, to become more informed as you go along. Use the language a person uses for themselves. If you don't know what pronouns to use and you feel comfortable, it's just to ask the person. And also it is somebody's gender identity, of course, is their private information to share or not to share. So what I'm just going to do is, this is a shorter video. The sound is a bit better in this, so hopefully you'll be able to hear it, but there are subtitles as well. I'm just going to show you this video here. After the bank robbery, we will show you the video.
You could use a little smoothness.
Pete? Pete Zagarine? Oh, that's Peter. I taught him social studies.
Get smooth with creamy Snickers.
Hi, my name is Ashley Wild, and welcome to my channel, Ashley's Wild Life. A question I get a lot is, what is the best thing I can do to support someone who is transgender or gender non-binary? There are 100,000 things that can happen that can be positive for someone who is trans or non-binary. Things that can feel supportive from their family and friends, things that can make the world around them safer and better. A big one is do your research and know what you're talking about, but I'm going to set that one aside because I think there is an answer for this question. As always, I am asserting my own opinion as a gender non-binary person. I don't speak for everyone, and what I think is right isn't going to be right for all trans people. But from my perspective, the best thing you can do to support someone who's transgender is to treat them like a person. This sounds really obvious, and here's the reason why it isn't. As human beings, we don't really like things that feel new or strange to us. We don't like change, and we don't like to look stupid. For that reason, if you meet someone who is different from you in a way that you have never encountered before, there's a really high chance that you're going to feel awkward and not know what to do about it. And usually what we do as humans in response to that feeling is we ignore that person. We ignore the person who makes us feel uncomfortable in our ignorance. When you walk around and every day of your life consists primarily of being ignored, it's pretty lonely. Trans people are normal people, and I'll speak for myself. I just want to feel normal. I just want it to be okay that I am who I am. I want to go through the world and not watch eyes turn away from me, not watch the cashier be friendly to the person behind me and silent to me. The best thing, in my opinion, is treat trans people how you would treat anybody else. Thank you for watching. I'll see you next week. Bye-bye. I'm posting videos every single week.
I think it's a nice message there, isn't it? You know, that we treat everybody as individuals, we respect everybody as individuals, everybody who comes into our services, you know, each person, you know, and I think we'd be really, I know you'd all agree with that, and I know you'd all follow that very, very strongly. And I think in our work, we really do respect and treat everybody individually. And it's that we can be, you know, advocates and we can be champions, do you know what I mean, to ensure that our students get treated the way that they should be treated. So what we're going to do now is we're going to move a little bit forwards, and we're going to just look at a couple of different issues with respects to the LGBT community, and we're going to broaden it out even just from trans, and we're going to just look at a few different issues. The first one, what we're going to look at is, and it's an interesting question, and I find it often comes to my door, and I'm sure you've possibly experienced it too as well. I particularly get it from international students, and I get it from students who have a disability. And what they ask me, and I've also had it from LGBT students as well, is, can you give me a list, is usually what they say. Can you give me a list of companies that are overtly positive to recruiting students with a disability, or students, international students, or students or LGBT students? And sometimes I'm left thinking they must think I have a magic little box that I can pull out this list of companies. But like yourselves, as we know, due to our Equality Acts, every single employer cannot discriminate under these issues. However, it can be interesting to look at what companies overtly promote their positive, being positive to recruiting students from particular minority groups. So what I'd like you to have a little think about is how would you advise a student to find overtly positive employers to recruiting LGBT students? How would you advise them to do that? And pop it into the chat. Any ideas coming back, Georgina?
Yeah, there's a few coming in now, Christiane. Research the company culture, consider community engagements, employee groups, by networking, by joining groups they can refer them to wherever they need information. See, do they have LGBTQ staff networks?
Lovely, lovely. Loads of lovely good ideas there. Really good, really good. And just to add in a couple more, you know, there's a few things that they can do. There's one of them is the Equality, Diversity and Inclusion mark, which employers can apply for and display on their websites or on their Twitter or their LinkedIn or whatever. Can be a nice way for students to see that they actually really have taken this part of their Equality Act seriously and won an EDI mark, you know. Certainly to look at, is there an overt, you know, involvement in Pride, or Pride, do they have a Pride partner? Just to look at their value statements or their non-discrimination statements. Have they made those very public and very overt? Do they really promote that they're an equal opportunities employer? Because every employer should be an equal opportunities employer. They have to be by legislation. But some will really, really push that to show, no, we really do stand by this. This is something we're really proud of. This is something that we really put forward, you know. Do they have a diversity officer? Do they have diversity initiatives? do they sponsor particular events, you know? Obviously, to have a look at the website and the social media that the employer has. Are they very active around particular events, particular initiatives, particular times of the year, what sort of publications and articles they do. So by really, I suppose, for a student to really dig deep, they can get an idea. And that again is up to a student. Many of my students, I find, don't have, you know, they don't have this wish, or they say, look, they should be equal opportunities. That's just that. But some have, for me, have found that they would like to approach an employer that they feel is overtly that, again, that real positive discrimination, you could say it, or not discrimination is the wrong word, sorry, but a positive sort of attitude to employing a diverse community. A really nice place to look at as well is the Human Rights Campaign Foundation Best Places to Work. They have a Best Places to Work for LGBTQ equality. Now, although this is in the States, the nice thing about it is a lot of the big companies, a lot of the big companies are listed on this, who have a sort of a headquarters, or they have a sort of an offices over in Ireland as well. But they sort of do sort of a benchmarking on the policy, practices and benefits to the LGBTQ employees, and they give an actual mark according to different indexes, which is a nice thing for people to look at, and can certainly give you a bit of a steer as to how particular companies have scored. The other thing for students, and I think it was something that somebody mentioned in the chat there, is just for them to be aware of the LGBTI plus community network in Ireland. There is loads and loads of organisations. We look at TENI, Outhouse, the LGBT Federation, LGBT Ireland, Belong To. You know, there is many organisations that provide a variety of different help and advice and support. And the lovely thing about it is in the past, I've had, particularly I was working with a student and I referred them to LGBT Ireland and to TENI, and they were able to give contacts from a professional standpoint that the particular individual could talk to about working in that particular field. So just to remind our students that there is lots of support out there that can help with networking, contacting, you know, professionals, getting advice, doing information interviews, etc., like we would with all our students. But just for them to be aware that there's loads and loads of different organisations out there. The other question that often comes up then is disclosure. And I suppose, like all our students, you know, those with a disability or those from the LGBT community, when we look at disclosure, you know, it's not a right or wrong. It is a pros and cons of both. And, you know, many might decide, nope, I don't want to, you know, disclose. I don't want to let my employer know, and they're absolutely within their rights to do that. And then others might say, well, actually, I would like them to be aware of, and I'm going to have to request time for parts. If I'm transitioning and I want to do a medical transition, I might have to have time to do that, and I want my employer to know. And it might be I just want my line manager to know. Somebody might say, well, actually, I'd like my team to know. So from a student's point of view, there is areas about, they might have a look at the organisational attitude of the company. Do they promote LGBTI plus activities? You know, for some people it might be a personal experience. How's their personal experience gone in the past? Some might have had a very positive experience with companies in the past and might feel the confidence to be able to do that again. Like that again, some people might have had a bad experience and a negative experience, and that's put them off doing that again. So it really is, I suppose, a conversation that we need to have with our students, like in our consultation rooms, to look at the pros and the cons. What do they feel most comfortable about? The repercussions of disclosing or not disclosing, and that, of course, ultimately it is their decision, but that we've teased that out with them in a way that helps them and helps them feel confident in which road that they actually want to go down. The other thing just to be aware of with students is a little bit with social media. I particularly look at my own kids, you know, what age are they now? They're 15 and 13, going on 16 and 14, and they are so prolific in social media. And I know that particularly with my 15-year-old, he doesn't understand the repercussions of putting stuff on social media, and it being there. And however many times I tell him that just be careful, this sticks around. It's just to say to our students, just beware of yourself on social media. If you don't want certain information to be disclosed, just be aware, Google yourself, look at your privacy settings on your Instagram page or your Twitter account, just for yourself, that you're happy with what is being viewed, and what potential employers might be able to search up about you. And if you're happy with that, that's great. If you want it to be private, change your settings, just really look into it carefully. And the other thing is just with respects to particularly trans students, is that when they're applying or being employed, is just to make sure that they have their references set up correctly for themselves. So if they have gone through a transition and their previous employee knows them by a different name, that's a conversation that they're going to need to have with their referee, so that there isn't any confusion, so that just any references have been set up with ease of purpose and just seamlessly, and so that it's very, very easy for them to, do you know what I mean? So that's as smooth and as least stressful for the individual as possible. Okay, and if I have time, I'm going to come back to this video, but I'm not going to worry about it too much now, because there is a couple of things that I just want to go back to you. But I just wanted to let you know, there was a message went out from Icast. Now, to be honest with you, I'd say it was about 18 months ago. And I remember it tweaked my interest because it was from somebody in one of the Icast universities, and they said, have you done initiatives for your LGBT community? And if you have, what have you done? So people would have, I presumably, emailed that person back. So I said, listen, would you mind sharing your results with me, so I can just have a look at what's being done around the place. So these were the sorts of things that have been done down in the UK. So TG Consulting published a book, You Are a Limited Edition, as a toolkit for their students, which covers lived experience around LGBTI plus imposter syndrome, mental health, etc. Now I should say to you, this presentation I will send around to you, so you'll have it. A good few places did mentoring. Some had a confidential, dedicated email address. Some did a finding LGBTI plus inclusive employers, and that's, I suppose, again, it's about the overtly positive employers, as we say, because with equality, every employer should have equal opportunities, but just those that have that extra special positivity. Specific information on social media and on their website, work with LGBTI societies and networks. Some places invited LGBTI plus friendly employers to careers fairs, and some had panel discussions with employers. So there's really, really interesting stuff that has been done over in different universities. And I'd have to say all of the feedback that I got from that individual was very, very positive. It was very well taken up. And really, really beneficial for people to do. So from us, what have we done? So what I have done is when I was, I suppose, putting together information, what I felt was I couldn't come across an Irishized, really in-depth resource for LGBTI plus students that was careers related. And that's where I started my journey on. So what I did was I have compiled resources for students, graduates and career coaches on disclosure, dealing with discrimination, transitioning in the workplace, considering your online presence, transitioning your referees, and finding overtly LGBTI plus inclusive companies. So what I've done is I have compiled information on that. I've used a lot of videos, I've used images, quotes. I've tried to make it not just static black and white handouts. It is available on our website at the moment. What we are going to do is we're going to send it out to the AHECS link. And basically, you are more than welcome to customize it for your own students, for your own institutions. I'm absolutely delighted for you to do whatever it is you want. You can put it onto your websites, etc. Because I feel if I've done this work, there's no point in it just being there for the TU Dublin students. I would be delighted for it to go widely around. So that has been put together. The other thing that I have done is I've done a career coaching guide for working with LGBTI students in a one-to-one setting. So this is just a little bit about, you know, factors that we need to be aware of when doing a one-to-one. So for example, you know, many of the you know, different career assessments may not have been normed for LGBTI plus students, or there may be sort of situations from a family setting that is impacting on somebody's career planning, decision making, etc., etc., etc. So what I've done is I've put together a career coaching guide for just about how to work on a one-to-ones. I'm waiting for that. I'm going to send it to, before we make that public, I'm going to actually send it to LGBTI Ireland, TENI, and our own Equality, Diversity, Inclusion Directorate in TU Dublin, because I want them to vet it and to make sure that it's okay. I should have said before, the information that we have on our website, that has been vetted by LGBT Ireland and the EDI. So that is not just come from the top of my head. So I suppose that's going to be then done and disseminated, because I just feel a lot of it is very innate to us as career coaches. I think in our work we are very student centered. You know, I really feel that, and I have to say that's why I love being a career coach and meeting all of you guys, is because it's a really lovely people to work with and really, really care about students. And I think that is one of the most important parts of our work with particular minority groups. So I think, you know, it's not a big leap. It's just sometimes maybe little nuggets of information that can really, really help to bring ourselves forward working with these people. So that's going to be disseminated shortly. I have finished it, but I'm just getting it vetted, so that'll be sent out to you. So just to finish up, there's just a few resources there. There's TENI, as I said, I have spelt that wrong as I look at the thing there. So it's TENI.ie, LGBT Ireland and Belong To. Really, three really useful organisations. Have glossaries, terms, knowledge, publications, information, particularly TENI for transgender issues, has an inordinate amount of information on their website. Absolutely brilliant. But the three organisations are really, really excellent. So that has brought us back to the end of our presentation. I hope you found it useful, and I hope you got something out of it. I'm sorry that we are right up onto the time, so there's very little time left for questions, but just in case somebody has a little questions, if they want to pop it into the chat.
Okay, Christiane, there's 3 questions in there already. Can you access the chat yourself, or do you need me to read it for you?
I can access the chat. Yeah. So where's the...
Okay, so was the first one there from Connor? If you see 1320.
There you
are.
Yes, in terms of the statistics, trans, is that people who have publicly stated this? Yes, it is publicly stated, so they're recorded. To my glasses, I don't even have my glasses. Can you read that out for me, Georgina? Sorry. It's very tiny on my screen.
I can read it for you, Christiane.
Thank you.
It's right in front of me, there's no problem. So Connor's question, you've seen a bit of it. In terms of the statistics of 15.5 million people identifying as trans, is that people who have publicly stated this, or is there actually an underreported number of people globally? And the second part of the question was, in terms of only 2 genders being listed on the Irish census this year, is that going to lead to further underreported in this situation?
Very good point, Connor. Very good point. And I'd say you're absolutely dead right, Connor. The underrepresentation would be huge. I haven't looked at my census forms yet this year. There's only 2 genders, Connor, is there?
Sorry, yeah, there's just male and female are the only 2 options listed.
Really? I'm surprised, I have to say. I really am surprised. I'd say you're dead right, Connor. I'd say hugely underrepresented.
Yeah, no, I was just interested in terms of, I suppose, what the kind of real percentage might be.
Yeah, yeah. And I have to say, I wouldn't know, Connor. I wouldn't know. But I would say, yes, I would agree with you that it would be hugely underrepresented. I wouldn't know what the actual figure would be.
No, that's perfect. Thanks a million.
Christiane, another question from Derek. Are there any job fairs that promote EDI employment?
Derek, I haven't heard of any job fairs in Ireland that specific. Now, I don't know if anybody else has. Has anybody else?
Thanks anyway, I just wondered.
No, I haven't. And the only way I've heard of it is that some universities over in the UK have specifically invited particular employers, but that's the only time I've heard of it. Otherwise, it's a general fair for business or for engineering or that. But I haven't heard of a sort of an EDI fair in Ireland anyway.
It might be something to think about for the calendar.
Yeah, definitely.
I haven't either, Christiane. I do come across a few courses that employers run specifically for sort of minority groups of different types. So been a few interventions in that space, but I think Angela put something into the chat there where she's actually asking employers to maybe indicate or state their approach to EDI, LGBTQI, when they're sort of presumably, Angela, uploading vacancies, which that's something that we do, which obviously we should be doing and we will do.
Yeah, great.
Yeah, we just have an employer letter that we send out. We've asked them if they can say it. And if we don't see it, we're asking them to state it if possible.
That's super, Angela. Super.
Christiane, another question from Maria. Is there a list of top LGBT employers in Ireland? There is in the UK.
We don't have, no. Well, not that I'm aware of. Again, I shouldn't say we don't have. I haven't heard of that because I know in the UK they have, what's the name of that organisation? Begins with a W.
Forbes?
No, they have anyway, it's gone out of my head. But no, not that I'm aware of. It's more what I'm aware of is if they have the EDI mark, because there used to be an organisation called Glen in Ireland, and Glen had champions, but then Glen dissolved. So there was a list of Glen champions, which was LGBTI, and there was a list of the Glen champions each year, but that's gone by the wayside. They come under questioning. So from the research I did, the only thing I could come up with then was the EDI, having replaced that. The mark, the EDI mark.
Thanks, Christiane. No more questions.
Great.
Okay, Christian, that's been such an interesting session, and it's been so useful. I think such an interesting and incredibly important conversation to really hopefully kick off. Today starts that process, and learning from your experience and your enthusiasm is just amazing. So thank you so much on behalf of the AHECS executive and on behalf of the members who are here today and those who wanted to be here and for other reasons haven't been. And we look forward to working with you on this in the future and to sort of disseminating your experience. And it's just been amazing. Thank you so much.
Oh, thank you so much. You're so good. Thank you. I've really enjoyed it. So we can all be champions together of this area, can't we? All be champions together. Yeah, great stuff. Thanks a million.
Thanks so much.